BRICS can create viable currency options. U.S. dollar dethroned. BRICS can create viable currency options. U.S. dollar dethroned. Oh yeah. You're listening to HAK. That's Hack News. That's right, I'm a hacker. That's Hakeem Alexander Communications with 2 Ks for those of you who don't know. You haven't been keeping up. And this is from an article on SputnikGlobe.com. The link is on Callin as a link that you can read for yourself so that you know that I'm not just making this shit up. And this is from their category World, and it's titled BRICS Can Create Viable Currency Options as Dollar Dethroned. U.S. Economist Sachs, S-A-C-H-S. It was published today at 5:16 GMT. That's the 1st of September 2023. There's a silly image here of some guy sitting down. Anyway, who cares? It says Washington, Sputnik. The U.S. dollar will eventually be dethroned as the dominant global currency, and the BRICS can create viable alternatives. Jeffrey Sachs, a world-renowned economist and president of the UN Sustainable Development Net Solutions. What the fuck? That name. All right, hold on. So, renowned economist and president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network told Sputnik. Gosh, that's a way more than a mouthful. All right. He says, this is in quotes, I don't know how he sounds. Let's see. The BRICS can create viable alternatives to the dollar. In this sense, yes, the dollar will be dethroned as the overwhelmingly dominant global currency, Sachs said. That is inevitable in the long run in any event, given the declining share of U.S. GDP and global trade. The BRICS will hasten the transition to a multi-currency system, and the U.S. dollar will still have its role, but a much smaller one among many currencies, Sachs added. There's an earlier article which I'm actually going to read too, but continuing with this one first, it says, last week, the BRICS group of major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, announced that its membership is more than doubling. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia were invited to join the group. Their membership will take effect on January 1st, 2024. That's just 3 months from now. According to the group, this year, the BRICS overtook the global GDP contribution of the G7 countries and accounts for nearly 1/3 of world economy. Well, I don't know. Is that big of a deal? The BRICS overtook the global GDP contribution of the G7 countries? I don't know. Sputnik. Why is this periodical called Sputnik? And they're in Washington? Is this another one of those Eastern European deals? All right, let's take a look. Since that was an easy read there, let's see what else we got here. This is another one from the World News here. Is this? Let me click on that. Does that go anywhere? Yeah. And it was published a little bit earlier, it looks like, today. Gosh, what is going on here? Yes, I accept your freaking spyware, your cookies. All right, let's take a look. Oh, 1 minute ago, Russia thwarts Ukraine's drone boat attack. All right, this is definitely a. Where is this? Why are they? Is this located in Russia? I'm gonna have to look up this media outlet. Does anybody know where they're from? I mean, it's called Sputnik, obviously. Let's see. Warpig says, gold dinar with a collection of coins with leaders we murdered. Laughing, well, LMAO. I'm not going to read that out what that means. Well, Andrew's still here, and Andrew says, that's even before they added the 6 new members, and Sputnik is a partially Russian-based publication. All right. Well, let's look at what else they have to say over here, Andrew, since since nobody else is interested in very important global and economic politics. Gosh, it's no wonder why we're so dumb as a group of Americans. People don't care about anything. They just want to go and wear Nikes and fucking Prada and get lit at the bars. All right. I mean, isn't it, just like, what's wrong with a little bit of a rush of adrenaline? Anybody heard of taking a walk outside, riding your bicycle, going to the gym, all kinds of other things that can make you feel high from your own body? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Where do we get lost? Where do we get lost here? All right. This is Hack News, Hakeem Alexander Communications. I'm on Callin, Social Podcasting, Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom Social Audio, Inc. This is another article. It was 18 hours ago. So this is older than the one I just previously read, and I'm going to continue going down this little rabbit hole of all these articles about BRICS, because the point here is to learn as much about it as possible. Hey, Zach, how you doing? And so Andrew said, I've been riding my bike for my whole life and also enjoy some marijuana. Nothing wrong with either. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with marijuana. I just don't. And anyway, where the hell did you get that from? I never even mentioned that. I said getting lit at the bars. I'm talking about alcohol. What the hell? I don't smoke weed or drink just because I'm not really into it. They both stink. All right. In my opinion, something happened to me where I just kind of grew out of it. I don't know. Maybe it was living in China for 5 years where it was extremely illegal, and I came back to the United States and had friends, and I smoked a little bit, and then it just kind of got, it's one of those things. I think that my rebellious nature, the fact that everybody's doing it, really got the better of me, and it just makes me sick now. That's the power of my delusional and insane mind. All right, so let's take a look at this. This was from, again, 18 hours ago, also on Sputnik. It says, World, get the latest news from around the world. Live coverage, offbeat stories, features, and analysis. Everybody says that. All right, BRICS expansion will strengthen OPEC plus provide more leverage. U.S. economy, Jeffrey Sachs. Again, Sachs is writing a lot of this. Washington Sputnik. The recently announced BRICS expansion will strengthen the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. Plus, right? That's OPEC plus. That's what the plus is signed in there. Is that what that's supposed to mean? The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus. What the hell does the plus stand for? All right. And give BRICS nations more leverage in negotiations on the global stage. Jeffrey Sachs, renowned U.S. economist and president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, told Sputnik, quote, the BRICS expansion will strengthen the BRICS members and give these members more leverage in negotiations in international forums. It will also strengthen OPEC Plus, Sachs said. Sachs further noted that the BRICS nations will play a leading role as the world goes through a deep energy transition to zero-carbon energy, including renewables, green hydrogen, and nuclear, among others. Here's another quote. Mineral investments will be of great significance. Oh, wait, no, that's just still Sachs, so it has to sound like this guy again. Mineral investments will be of great significance in the upcoming industrial and energy transformations, Sachs said. The BRICS nations will play a leading role in the global production and trade in strategic minerals. At its recent summit in Johannesburg, the BRICS Group, okay, so that's what they're called, the BRICS Group, not the BRICS Summit, not the BRICS Council, not the BRICS Program, the BRICS Group. At its recent summit in Johannesburg, the BRICS Group of major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, announced that its membership, read this before, right, is more than doubling. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia were invited to join BRICS with membership effective January 1st, 2024. According to the group, this year, the BRICS overtook the global GDP contribution of the G7 countries and accounts for nearly one-third of the world economy. Or actually one-third of world economic activity. Okay, so I read that before. But let's take a look now. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole of all the different links. Oh, this is multimedia. How do BRICS stack up against G7? Do I want to click on that? Am I wanting to watch a video? No, good. It has text. This is perfect. Oh, there's graphics. This is cool. I like pretty pictures. All right. Let's see what pretty pictures we got here about this BRICS. What is going on with the device here? Hello, Finn. All right, what the gosh. All right, Russia thwarts Ukraine drone boat. Wait, that's not what I'm reading. How did that get there? How do BRICS stack up against G7? What am I? See, I just start reading. I just reading. All right, multimedia. This is also still on Sputnik, which is at sputnikglobe.com. By the way, the K is how you spell Sputnik, for those of you who don't know. SPT or SPUTNIK. GLOBE.com, sputnikglobe.com. That's where I get the K's from, by the way, from Russia and Germany. I like in some of those European languages that they use K's instead of C's. C's are fucking useless. Why do we have them anyway? You have an S and you have a K. What do you need a C to make up the difference for? I'm a little annoyed by the C in the English language. What convenience does it have for combining with, H's? Okay, Andrew, you beat me to it. You stop. All right, we have other words. Chains, chew, chalk. There you go, with the little, what is that thing called on top of the C there? All right. So, let's see. So, multimedia, this is still from Sputnik. Multimedia. When a picture is worth 1,000, maybe in a Russian kind of accent. Multimedia. When a picture is worth 1,000 words. See what's happening in the world from a more visual perspective with Sputnik's photo galleries, infographics, and other multimedia content. Right? I don't know if that was a good one. All right. So this is BRICS. Oh gosh, come on. All right, so it's some of the same information here. BRICS announced a historic expansion of its membership this week, incorporating 6 new countries into the bloc. I like how they spell B-L-O-C. Where did that come from? Like the Soviet bloc, right? Bloc. Why bloc? I'm going to have to look that word up. How do BRICS economies compare to the G7 group of wealthy industrialized nations? The BRICS, okay, and when was this one published? This was, this one's from the 26th of August, 2023 at 1800 hours and 35 minutes. All right. BRICS announced a historic expansion of its membership this week, incorporating 6 new countries into the bloc. How do BRICS economies compare to the G7 group of wealthy industrialized nations? Well, before I answer that question by reading it, I'm going to add the link to the second article and then that one to the links on Callin, because I need to be a responsible rogue journalist, right? So let me put that in there in the room. Ooh, what the hell? Why is it supposed to be in the HAK news show? Come on, what the hell's happening here? Oh my gosh, the first one is not still there. How did this happen? Okay, this is just a little bit more than rather annoying. Now I have to go back to the first article, and that's really annoying. Good. So first I got to go back to the first one, grab the link, copy the URL, go back here, put the link in there. Boom. Right there that goes. Now I've got to go in here. So annoying. I'm going to put that there, and then one more time, I'm going to go over. Now I got to click through the articles once again and go to the third one because Colin is acting up. See, you guys with this social audio and social podcasting really have to get it together. I mean, it's free. I get that, but really, some of this stuff is, it's like you're trying to discourage us to not use your platforms anymore. All right, there we go. Now I got the 3 articles there. Let's see if it'll save like a good little. The live chat is available. Yeah, public. Everything's public. Yeah. Live chat so people can come in and troll. Good. There we go. Let's see. All right, let me check the information. The links are there. Good. Now I can finally, in peace, go and read the last article. Finally. Or is it the last one? So, once again, BRICS announced a historic expansion of its membership this week, incorporating 6 new countries into the bloc. That's BLOC, right? How do BRICS economies compare to the G7 group of wealthy industrialized nations? The BRICS group's membership more than doubled at the bloc summit in Johannesburg, South Africa on Thursday. Here we go again, incorporating Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The original BRIC bloc. That's hilarious. The original BRIC bloc, consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, was created in 2009 after years of negotiations to facilitate economic cooperation and joint investment opportunities, global development, UN reform, and providing developing countries with a greater voice and representation in international financial institutions. Yeah. South Africa joined the bloc in 2010. Wow, this is a lot older than I thought it was. I mean, I was seeing this stuff in China in 2016 when I was first there, but wow. So it was going on way before that. They were right, years of negotiation. Right, so South Africa joined the bloc in 2010, creating BRICS. Well, I guess with all those different countries, you would have to take a long time to negotiate these things, because that is no small feat. And I'm not talking about the ones in your shoes. The original BRIC bloc, right? So South Africa joined the bloc in 2010, creating BRICS. So that's where the S comes from. The acronym BRIC was coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. Wow, it's way back there too. To highlight the group of developing economies he predicted would exceed the combined economic power of the developed West by the year 2050. All right. So Goldman Sachs economists coined this term in 2001 to highlight the group of developing economies he predicted would exceed the combined economic power of the developed West by the year 2050. People should be concerned if any small amount of this is truly actually happening, which it is, right? People need to become more financially literate, because when the shit goes down, you better be ready. All right, so continuing. Oh, yeah. But the Economist may have underestimated the pace of the BRICS bloc's rise, with the 5-nation bloc officially overtaking the G7's share of global domestic product, GDP, in purchasing power parity, PPP, terms earlier this year. So the Economist may have underestimated the pace of the BRICS bloc's rise, with the 5-nation bloc officially overtaking the G7's share of global gross domestic product in purchasing power parity terms earlier this year. With the addition of 6 new members, the expanded BRICS now accounts for almost 37% of the global economy, compared with about 30% for the G7 nations, which include the U.S., Canada, Britain, Germany, Italy, France, and Japan. That's not looking good. Although Andrew was saying that that was before the addition of the 6 new members. So, all right, we shall see. So that they surpassed the G7. With South African officials revealing that over 40 nations have expressed interest in joining the economic superbloc, and member nations' economic growth continuing to surge relative to the G7, O'Neill's predictions might need a bit of a touch-up. And so we're looking at the share of BRICS and G7 countries in global GDP. For those of you who are in Callin and have access to the links that I put in there, there's some pretty charts. And wow, in 1995, the BRICS had 16.9% shares in the global GDP, and the G7 countries had 44.9. In 2010, the BRICS countries were at 26.6, while the G7 dropped to 34.3. That's a 10.6% drop. And then I did the math myself, by the way. And then we have in 2023, BRICS is now at 36.9. That's up 10.3%, while the G7 countries dropped from 34.3 to 29.9. That is crazy. That's astounding how that's adding up if these numbers are true. And the new members are Argentina, Egypt, Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Ethiopia. This is a cool, actually, graphic. I wonder, can I download? I want it. Yeah, I'm downloading that image. Thank you very much. Because now I can see this very clearly on my own time. I can study it and look at those flags. It's funny how 3 of the flags are so similar. Well, actually, a lot of them are in the new members of BRICS, and similar to the ones in the original BRICS. Specifically, I'm talking about India, Russia, in the original BRICS, and then Argentina, Egypt, Iran, UAE, and Ethiopia in the new countries. Meanwhile, Canada, Italy, and France have similar styled flags. If you look at them, you'll see what I'm talking about together. I don't know, but it's the human brain. We see patterns that may not mean anything at all. It's just fun to look at. All right, that's it. That's the news about BRICS so far from Sputnik. I actually found it first because I was on Mr. and Mrs. Google's, and that was one of the ones that showed up on there. And I'm always looking out for BRICS news, even though it's super mainstream news, right? And who knows what we're getting with that. But at least, I mean, what? This is an interesting article. Men's neck musculature informs perceptions of parental abilities and interest in long-term relationships. I'm going to have to... Oh my gosh. It reminds me of this guy in China who I used to call him Sir Traps a lot because he just looked like he did so many trap exercises that they were like the most dominant feature of his body. But then I learned from a guy who studies steroids and things like that, that's actually one of the side effects of people who take steroids, anabolic steroids, is that because there are a lot of receptors for testosterone in those in that part of the body, that's where it accumulates. And I've seen a couple people who have that issue, and may or may not be from steroids. How the hell would I know? I've never used them. I don't even like the creatine phosphate or taking protein powders. I think it's insane that people do that stuff. But hey, you want to get ahead, shrivel your nads and go into rages. I'm already angry enough as it is. I don't need to take that. I mean, I might as well be turning green. Let's see what Maria over here says. Miss Snickle Fitz Von Fitty Britches. She says, I thought it was up to 43% now. I don't know. That's not, I mean, look at the article. It's the third link in my info here. So is the G20 dissolved now, given half are now BRICS members? Probably looks like it. The West, Andrew, the West is still pushing for the G20 to remain relevant, and it kind of depends on whether they can coerce India into subverting BRICS. India? How would India subvert BRICS? You mean that they'll take it over from the inside, Andrew? What's going on there? Oh, there's Andrew calling in. All right, Andrew, I'm going to take your call in a second here. Let me just get to that. I got to set up my little system. Hold on. Here we go. Andrew, make your mic hot, brother. How you doing?
It's gonna be a thunderstorm in a minute. We're trying to get outside before it gets wet again.
Yeah, so what you got?
Couple of things. Just a quick response to the last thing you were reading my comment.
Yeah.
You can't take over the BRICS from the inside. The BRICS is a consensus-based organization.
Yeah.
add these 6 new members, they had to gain consensus. And the current current president country is South Africa.
Yeah.
More influence over who the new members would be. But you can kind of see in the different countries that were added um, which of the original 5 or 4 plus South Africa, which of the members were pulling for which nations. Yeah, India would not be able to really ruin the BRICS on its own.
Yeah.
Population, economy, kind of makes the G20 relevant anyways. A lot of the new BRICS members are also in the G20. So it's really just a matter of like, if India kind of stops participating very much or can kind of gum up the works on decision making and block the will of the rest of the membership, that would kind of be like the West's ultimate ideal outcome for India, because as out of the 5 original members, India was kind of the one that was hedging their bets the most and playing the West and the Eurasian integration off of each other. So India, for instance, is also in the Quad, which is kind of Western, U.S.-led security, quote-unquote, alliance in the Pacific, which is basically the United States have to limit China's access to shipping lanes and to encircle China with bases. China and India have the ongoing border conflict, where they both claim ownership of a decently large section of their shared border into the other's, claims territory.
Yeah.
Why the West thinks that maybe they can play up the divisions with India specifically. It's not necessarily that India on its own makes or breaks the BRICS or the G20. It's just that that's where the West sees. They feel that they see them.
Well, that makes sense. India is one of the 14 countries.
As far as like the dollar dethroned, you were saying earlier about people should be concerned with becoming financially literate. The dollar's used as an international currency for settling accounts for other nations to purchase oil or other commodities where they're importing.
Yeah.
That doesn't really affect the United States' ability to invest in its own infrastructure. What it does is it allows the United States to invest really heavily in war and not invest in its own economy and or imbalance of accounts. So they have a current accounts deficit for years now, ever since the Korean War.
Are you talking about their importing? Right. Okay, that's right. You're getting to that. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. That's what I was going to ask, if that's what you're referring to. Trade deficit.
Saudi Arabia uses the U.S. dollar for their oil sales. The United States is going to see its currency inflate only because it is importing so much. Your own currency that your sovereign government can create inside your country of productive infrastructure does not cause inflation. But when your currency outside of your borders borders where the money is effectively sequestered instead of producing a real productive benefit for the whole economy, scenarios are more when you'll start to see inflation. So BRICS on top of the state's economy or any of the rest of the Western economies own terrible behavior that is extremely self-serving for the financial elite of the United States and the other Western nations is the problem for our economy.
Well, as I understand it,
portions of
yeah, as I understand it, would you say that it's because not necessarily just the United States' own greed itself and the government, the Treasury, but because we allow our money to be issued by a private bank, specifically the Federal Reserve?
talking about inflation? Why is it?
Well, no, I mean that you said that the United States government. You said the BRICS is not the threat to the economy; it's the government's own greed and spending and stuff like that. And I was asking, do you think, from my understanding, is it because of the fact that the state, the Treasury, doesn't print and issue the money? It's a private bank, the Federal Reserve. Is that part of the problem?
private banks are allowed by the Treasury to create money when they offer credit. Um, there's not a direct influx of money coming from the Treasury or the Federal Reserve into Chase, JP Morgan and Chase or Citigroup when they make a large loan. They are effectively also creating. But the point is, what is the money that's being created used for? Or what is the money that is being uh, loaned used? Is it being used for gambling on the stock market, or to create water purification, plants and high-speed rail infrastructure and improving telecommunications? There's a very big difference between those types of activities, and the result is very different as far as whether or not the economy inflates the economy.
So, do you think things like gambling on the stock market will inflate the economy, whereas improving infrastructure will improve the economy?
If you are creating money, whether it's treasury or JP Morgan Chase providing credit, if that credit is used to do something productive, like build actual to provide real commodities and health and quality of life, versus lent out to people who will essentially just put it into a casino, which is the stock exchange.
Right. Definitely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because real commodities, things that people can actually use, it makes more sense than if they're just speculating. Makes a lot of sense. That's great input. I mean, you've definitely opened up my awareness to a lot more, given me some answers and filled in a lot of gaps that I was looking for.
One other thing I wanted to add about the BRICS currency. So the BRICS rising, like I mentioned, like we talked about, I think has little to no impact on the domestic U.S. economy. It's certainly not going to crash the U.S. dollar for domestic use. And so, as we were just talking about, there's various other reasons for inflation that are almost entirely domestic. As a result of domestic policy, right? You can inflate the currency by importing drastically more than you export. And that's our problem being fixed. But another thing I was going to say, the BRICS currency that they're going to create is not currency like the euro.
Right.
Euro, they're not going to create gold dinar like Gaddafi was talking about.
Yeah.
Is like.
Do you think that's why Gaddafi was killed?
I think that's a big reason Gaddafi was killed, because the dollar is just about good thing. Non-U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gaddafi was for decades supporting, revolutionary struggle. For instance, the Irish Republican Army.
Yeah.
Onward, most of their arms from Gaddafi.
Wow.
Palestinian resistance were receiving a lot of arms from Gaddafi. There were many reasons that the United States didn't like Gaddafi, but Libya under Gaddafi became monetarily sovereign and was building giant infrastructure projects without going into debt to the International Monetary Fund. And then Gaddafi was saying the United States of Africa, and other regional cooperation organizations are still out of debt and stop giving our economic surplus to the World Bank and the IMF. So that was one of the biggest reasons that it killed Gaddafi. But another thing was basically also the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, and also you can view the sanctions on Iran as the same purpose as the Ukraine war. And what it's doing is it's isolating Europe from sources of energy that are not produced by U.S. corporations. So now remove Iran supply from Europe, remove supply from Europe, and now you've removed Russia's supply of gas to Europe, and so they're forced to buy United States-produced liquid natural gas. Just real quick, I don't want to for the BRICS currency. What they're going to do is create a unit of account for nations to settle international trade. in a currency like the euro that would replace countries that don't produce a sovereign currency. It's very similar to what they're discussing. Very similar, if not identical, to what John Maynard suggested in the Bretton Woods conference. John created a system for which might not be a national currency, and it would also not be necessarily an international currency, by which nations could settle accounts and keep a balance of trade. And it's not going to look like the euro. It's going to look more like what you've been talking about for South America, which is the sword would also not be a currency that would replace, the Brazilian real or the Colombian peso or anything like that. It would be a system of international trade that would allow countries to do trade without having to use the dollar.
Wow. So, and why do these countries, like, what is the main reason why they want to do this? Why BRICS wants to move
currency?
Yeah, make this kind of like, what's the main reason why?
Big reason is for the countries that have a lot of debt. So most of the countries, basically most of the global south were permanently colonized. And after colonization, after they gained formal independence, mostly after World War II, they were offered what seemed like really enticing deals by the West via the International Monetary Fund and those are institutions that came out of that Bretton Woods conference that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Are indebted to the point where
This is the Bretton Woods that ended in 1971, right?
Yeah, that system experienced an enormous shift after Nixon brought the U.S.
Right.
off of the gold standard because the U.S. actually didn't have enough gold to pay out to countries that wanted to convert dollars to gold.
Right.
Germany and other countries started to try to do that. The U.S. unilaterally shut off the gold standard and said, sorry, you guys are stuck with our dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 73, the U.S. made the agreement with the Saudi government, the monarchs.
The petrodollar, right?
Yeah, they created the petrodollar.
Mm.
The reason these countries want to do this is because the petrodollar being what it is, it means that if you don't produce oil or if you don't produce a lot of food or whatever other really vital commodity domestically, you have to import it. And to do that, you have to use dollars. And to get dollars, you have to devalue your own currency, which means you're devaluing the value of the labor of the people who live in your country.
Yeah.
Those products. So you're giving up your domestic products that your people have produced in your nation.
Yep.
What they want is a system that doesn't use national currency so that they can keep their domestic products to use it to develop their own nations. So the African nations that are joining want to be building industry or transportation infrastructure or telecommunications or have electricity 24 hours a day. So you have south to south investment. Countries like Russia and Iran, probably also China, and really any countries, they're also doing it so that they can be sanctioned.
Right.
Unilateral sanctions across the country's economy because people are forced into using the dollar.
Yeah. And they've been doing that.
Really heavily.
Yeah.
Iran, actually also Zimbabwe, Tanzania. There's tons of countries. 1/3 of the entire world's population live in a country that has U.S. economic sanctions.
Yeah, one of the
huge motivation for them to create non-dollar trade system.
Yeah, one of the things I was reading earlier, there's a little book of economics that was talking about how, protectionism was a thing and it could actually be, weaponized. How, the United States did that to China a few times, and then China came back, and it's like this back and forth.
Protectionism is develop your own economy, become wealthy.
Right.
The British, the United States, the Germans, and every other wealthy nation became wealthy.
Well, if you think what I'm talking about specifically is when, so I read, it says the cries for protectionism are as loud today as they were in Ricardo's time, referring to the economist David Ricardo, right? And it says China accused the U.S. of rampant protectionism for imposing heavy taxes on imported Chinese car tires. The decision to increase tariffs came after pressure from U.S. workers who had seen tire imports grow from 14 to 46 million from 2004 to 2008, reducing U.S. tire output, causing factory closures. Anyway, however, the U.S. had previously accused China of unfairly subsidizing its own tire industry, so tensions mounted. China's response was to threaten retaliatory increases in import taxes on U.S. cars and poultry. That's why I'm saying weaponized, because they're going back and forth threatening each other with the sanctions. That's what I meant by that.
Tariffs aren't sanctions. That's not what sanctions are.
Right. The sanctions are stopping the actual importation, right?
Sanctions, yeah. Well, sanctions have a variety of different forms, but they mostly involve the United States saying, okay, no private business entity or foreign government can do any business with, let's say, Iran's oil company or whatever other Iranian private company. You can't do any business with listed companies, with the government of Iran, or we will keep from being able to use the SWIFT system. So SWIFT is the interbank messaging system that the pretty much entire world uses to settle accounts between banks. And so they will shut your business down. And yes, that effectively does mean you can't import things. So, one way that the United States sanctions Cuba, and they kind of get, this is how they kind of can, on the one hand, actually, in real terms, the U.S. is stopping the import of food and medicine from Cuba without having to directly say so, is they'll say, okay, any cargo shipping company that docks a ship in Cuba cannot dock in the United States for the next 6 months. Any shipping company that does in Cuba, a country of 11 million people, has to understand that for the next 6 months after doing one transaction that results in cargo delivered to Cuba, cannot do trade with the 330 million person population.
And on what grounds? On what grounds do they justify making that decision? Like, what do they say? It's because it's possible contamination or terrorists on board. I mean, like, how do they say you can't do that?
Justify it by saying that, yeah, they without any evidence whatsoever will say that Cuba is a state sponsor of terrorism or that they're repressing their people. The founding documents of the U.S. on Cuba that arose in the late 1950s directly say that it's because of the fact that the government of Cuba used eminent domain to purchase U.S. oil and sugar infrastructure. So there was and there was also sugar plantations and sugar refining that were owned by U.S. corporations in Cuba. And Cuba used eminent domain to pay a market value assets, and then they nationalized the oil refining and the plantation. So in a response to that, the United States embargoed Cuba, and then also because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, actually physically put a blockade in place. So even in the years when there's not the blockade, there is still a threat that the United States could stop physically with their navy, stop any ship from docking. Nowadays, rather than doing that, it will, basically wreck the prospects of any private business or foreign government that does trade with you. Don't really justify it in any logical way. They should say, like, government policy. So
I just like my use of this word weaponizing. Even with what you just said, that's not, you don't consider that to be weaponizing, like tariffs and trade and sanctions. Okay, sanctions. That's what I was originally referring to. Actually, were the sanctions being weaponized? But no, I read from the book. I read from the book Tariffs. Yeah, yeah.
Fire reports don't need to be interpreted as a directed attack or an escalatory warfare between the countries. The thing is that the United States putting a tariff on not just Chinese, but say Japanese or German or any other country's imports serves a purpose, which is to allow a domestic industry to grow, so that there's domestic industry building the same things, and the price are more for the United States. So you can do that by subsidizing the industry that you want to grow, or putting tariffs on foreign industries that compete in the same arena, in the same as sanctions.
Right. Okay. So then, if I'm understanding this correctly, so sanctions use more physical, tactical means to block trade, whereas tariffs are more just economic and financial means. If I'm oversimplifying it.
In the case of Cuba, there was a physical blockade.
Yeah.
Together. So they create an atmosphere. They create an atmosphere where a foreign company or a foreign government is going to say it's not worth the even though we might like to do trade with Cuba for whatever commodity, either to export it to Cuba or to import from Cuba. It's not worth us doing it because the U.S. will cut our corporations and banks off of uh, the financial transaction infrastructure that the entire world uses to do trade. So we basically effectively can't trade with anybody if we trade with Cuba. Yes, in the 60s, you also had a situation where the U.S. physically was blockading any ship coming in or out of Cuba. But sanctions don't usually actually involve the physical presence of the U.S. military.
Hey, man.
Financial destruction.
Smoke them if you got them. Right? They're like, hey, if we can, we will. That's crazy. Andrew, I see that you're an ecologist, educator, and historian by profession. Is New Alignment, is it a talk that you do, or is it an organization that you created? What is New Alignment?
That's just a podcast I created on Callin a couple years ago now.
Okay. About history, strategy, contemporary struggles, and the culture of people's movement for political change. Good stuff. I mean, you really do. You've informed me of a lot of things, and I appreciate that. Do you have anything else to add to this? Because I've learned a lot. This is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say in closing, I think for me, the BRICS becoming stronger and developing real institutions that go beyond these founding conversations. It would be nice if we had something like BRICS, and now they're actually building infrastructure. They're doing currency. They're investing in each other's countries. I think it's a very good thing for world peace and stability. You know, you see China and India are two countries that have a border dispute, but they are coming to a consensus together about really important economic decisions together. You have Iran and Saudi Arabia waging a proxy war against each other in Yemen until they recently called a ceasefire and both joined BRICS. So I think it will be very good for the development of the infrastructure in the global south, and I think it will also eventually become a very good tool for countries that are indebted to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to relieve themselves of that debt, to be able to use their own domestic products, to develop their own economy for the well-being and prosperity of their people. And so if you're somebody, for instance, who doesn't like the fact that there's lots of people trying to migrate to the United States, an organization like BRICS will stabilize economically and also militarily stabilize a lot of the countries where people are coming to the United States from. So, I mean, I think regardless of where your politics are, if you understand what BRICS is, it's a positive development in the United States. Troubles with inflation are something for us to deal with domestic policy, you know, domestic industrial policy, domestic environmental policy, things like that. We can stabilize our own economy. It's not a threat for BRICS. So
Yeah.
thanks for having us for
Thank you so much, Andrew. I definitely appreciate that. I got Darlene Anderson over here on Wisdom. Let's see what she has to add to this conversation. Hello, Finn, Maria, Dylan, Carnal, Danny,
Hey,
Sin, Jenny, Brandy. What's up? And Andrew, thanks for sharing. I really appreciate
yeah,
that. Hey,
he
darling.
was sharing that. I mean, that was the big plan before Obama got in office to create that Amiro, which would be the dollar, the Canadian money, and then the South American. Be all one money. They just ran into problems trying to implement that because they would have to reestablish Social Security and you know, all those people have, set money. But if they transition it to another form of currency, and then those people in Cuba choosing to use the Bitcoin, and really things were getting flowing, and then America's still trying to slow them down because they're just individual people. This is 2024 coming up soon. And it's
Oh, yeah,
just
we're right around the
control.
corner.
Huh? I mean, it's just really control. People want to control everything. And they believe that they actually know everything, and they really don't. Because life is about those trials and tribulations. And if
I
you
know.
go
I'm
through it,
guilty of that. I wish I knew everything.
I mean, we could only hope. But every time we turn around, there's something new. I mean, I've been missing in action because I've been struggling with who I am. Because, I believe in training people to give them a new awakening. And,
Ditto.
and that young man, he brought a lot of different information about trade and
Yeah,
tariffs
Andrew.
but all these things exist, and guess what? We would only know they existed by our ability to participate in that process. But just think about the Trump children. How much money did they actually make? It was one term, but come on, we're not talking about that. How much money was, they were flying everywhere in the world. It was King Trump. And we allowed
Mhm.
that stuff to happen simply because so many of us just don't vote. And it's a very small percentage of Americans that actually do go to the booths. You understand that? So
Well,
those are the,
there's a lot of political apathy.
I mean, but it's more than that because when the children aren't making it, it's real because you see it. And I heard this lady, and she was talking about the trauma of the foster care system as she grew up as a foster child. And I couldn't even explain that to you because I always had my mother. But all the things that she went through that were so negative, and the abuse of foster children, but the mere inability of those children have effective communication skills for the lifetime because they just don't have any foundation, and they're not given any because America didn't plan for that. They just moved those children immediately at the sign of no family reunification, no nothing. But you have to understand that kinship is a major part in our society, and it limits money that would be coming for people who are connected by
Mm.
family, bloodlines. And that's what kinship is all about. But if you are not related and Caucasian, you can get the maximum amount of money. Some people were getting $1,800 for one child that may have been a drug baby in Sacramento. And, a lot of, I mean, they do take the children right at birth. If the mother is on any kind of drugs, you don't get a second chance. They put them right into the foster care system. And you just have to understand reasons why people lose their children. And they're not perfect. And there's really no learning curve out here. But here, when we're all dependent on the dollar to really work, we don't know what's happening right now. We don't know a thing. But something is. Something is a must. A must, not say must, but
Well, what do you think about what Andrew was saying about the fact that if taking care of the problems here at home would be including things like investing into infrastructure, like railroads and
But I got,
schools and
yes, I
things
mean,
that, yeah.
but all I'm saying is that was the big plan for Obama. And he actually gave states big chunks of money to think about what they would do in a time of crisis. Now, what happened over there in Maui? I don't know because somehow the fire department was not in communication with the armed services, and the armed services didn't have anything to say. And I'm saying, there has to be a strategy. But then they were saying that I mean, if you listen, you hear people say that celebrities and everybody's getting their houses painted royal blue, because somehow that's a reflection of that radar that they were using over there that may have been the cause of some of that fire. And I'm just
Wait a
saying,
minute. Are you one of these
I'm
direct energy
no, I'm
weapons people?
no, they say that they have that over there. Now I'm just paying attention to, you know, the military when they're doing their little briefings. So they do have that over there. But I'm saying also listening to the people over there. Quite frankly, they're not understanding what happened. I don't either. Why the pumps didn't work? Why the fire? I mean, when it's different, we had to ask ourselves what happened down there in Pleasanton, California. Wasn't that the whole city that burnt down? The banks and the schools and everything. I mean, brick buildings down to the ground. They couldn't control that fire. But why not? Why are we not planning for
Somebody
city
today,
infrastructure? Huh?
somebody today was talking about how there were bodies that were burned so completely that they were
Okay.
just ash and dust, and they didn't even find
Yes.
bones, which I thought
Yes.
was impossible for just
Because
regular fires because you have
they're
to.
saying this fire was not a regular fire, and they're
Yeah,
saying
because don't
over
you?
1,000 people are still missing.
Yeah, because
And
don't
I'm
you have
saying
to
that the
mechanically
heat.
pulverize bones even when people are cremated, right? It's like,
Well, no, I don't know how that works, but my mother was cremated, and her ashes were the ones they gave us were just ashes. But I believe that there are some things that just don't burn, and I
yeah,
don't. But the whole thing is that reality speaks, and they have a process of finding people because they had mail addresses for people, and they can have a system easily created to have people punch in a code or their social to identify that they're missing.
yeah,
But I'm saying when you're not trying to learn, we didn't know how many people actually were missing during New Orleans and the flood. We don't
yeah,
know. They didn't talk about that. They just said that a lot of people never returned. And that's all you have to roll with. But we all witnessed certain things. We all witnessed George
yeah.
Floyd. We all witnessed the January 6th incident. And we all witnessed Donald going to court to
Hmm.
fight for his belief of his America,
Well,
not
maybe y'all
America.
witnessed that. I'm not watching that.
Well, you don't have to, because you have to understand they're fighting for a different America. They don't want to believe in the rules. There's no rules and regulations where Donald lives. No, he bucks the rules, and a lot of people believe that they should buck the rules. But some of the rules are very oppressive. And so,
No,
but when people say, "Oh, they gave you a warning," and you got no warning, but somebody put a dime on you, then you
yeah.
don't get to broadcast anymore. That's the kind of power that I'm afraid of in
Well,
America,
I'm glad I'm
because it
independent of
exists.
all that. Well, it
Huh?
does. It's
It
censorship.
does. There's actually nothing you can say about that, because somebody has to assess once you're on the other side if you're even worthy to have a conversation. But
Yeah,
the thing is that we have to understand that we have to encourage young people to share their journeys, because this is a lot of trauma in America with young people. I can't imagine having to getting out of high school right away thinking about having sex, because I don't think I did that until I was 20 something.
mm,
But the whole thing is I'm 65 now. I can look back. But when these girls are, very sexually active at ages that they should not be, what are we really doing? Because we're just breeding more dysfunction. We have too many television shows, and even the cartoons talk about slavery. And I'm
don't get me
saying,
started.
oh, there's this some cartoon that I was watching with my grandbaby, and it was a man's name, right? But it was just Elam or something like that. But anyways, it was all about him being a slave and him having a master and him having command. And I'm saying, wow, they really want to embed this thought into somebody's mind that they have to be subservient to someone.
Yeah,
But in life, there is a God. In life, there's a universe. And you have to pray that the universe is working for you so that you can move forward in life. Because sometimes it's just not happening. But it doesn't matter, because it is, those sinkholes and the floods and all that recognition that,
mm.
we're living in this world and we're all trying to breathe the same air. But if there's no air to breathe, then we all die. And that's just real.
That is the truth, Darlene. Appreciate you sharing.
All right, well, stay
Any
on
final
your.
thoughts? I'm going to bring up Jenny over here on Callin.
Well, no more. I mean, currency. We have to understand that we are the current currency. We have to wake up in America, and we all have an obligation to share our truths. And when we share our truths, we just share our empowerment. We can all learn something because each one of us has a different journey for a purpose. And I thank you for letting me come up on your show. It's the
Of
only
course,
way I can
Darlene.
speak up right now. But you have a great evening.
All
Okay?
right, you as
Stay
well.
blessed and highly favored.
You as well. Thank you,
All right.
Darlene.
Bye-bye.
All right, I got Jenny Hatch over here, the Jenny Hatch Show on Callin. Hello, Jenny.
Okay. I just wanted to push back on what the other caller just said about my beloved President
About
Trump.
King Trump?
None of these moves by the BRICS nations would be happening if Donald Trump had not been president. Let's be clear on that.
Wait a minute. But BRICS was way before. BRICS started way before him.
Not saying he formed BRICS or he did anything to old BRICS stuff. What he did was he encouraged the BRICS nations to decouple from the American dollar. That is a fact.
Really?
Go ahead.
No, really. I'm asking. Really, he did?
Good. So if you will go back and watch Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, it happened almost the first week of his presidency. And then very soon after, you saw the Saudi prince, the one who had such a hand in making certain that President Obama went to certain Ivy League schools in America. If you'll see that, you'll notice that he was arrested and put in, I think, one of their hotels downtown Baghdad with the hundreds of other elites and Saudi um, the Saudi hierarchy. His brother took over, and the brother was actually in the Las Vegas hotel when that big shooting went down during that concert. Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
So he was in that hotel, and Trump's security team came to him and said, "Hey, uh, there, there's a hit on your life. They're going to try and take you out." And so they helped him escape and not be hurt during that. And this guy came to Trump and said, you saved my life. I want to do anything I can to help you. What should I do? It was his job to fly around the world to all these heads of state and talk to them about what was happening with the economies and how they wanted to decouple all of these countries from the IMF and the International Monetary Fund and the other, World Trade Organization groups, World Economic Forum, and say we want you guys to have sovereignty and be individual and have your own money. And so this is how we're going to do it. And this was part of Trump's plan. So this is all contained in the Q drops that everybody makes fun of me here on calling that I'm a Q person, but it's there. And if you go watch the old videos of his trip to Saudi Arabia, the Saudis had this dance where they gave him a sword, and it's really interesting.
Wow, somebody put a sword in his hand?
What?
I said, wow, somebody put a sword in his hand?
You got to watch the dance because it's a very respectful event to be invited to, and he was right there in the middle of it with all of his team. And so these moves you're seeing with the BRICS nation are not an accident. It's been planned for years. They're doing it. They're doing it at a great time. I personally think the dollar is going to collapse, and that's going to help get us away from the Fed and move to a gold standard ourselves.
Do you agree with Andrew that the dollar is going to collapse not because of BRICS, but because of the United States' own, ineptitude?
These moves by the BRICS nations will hasten it. And yes, I believe both of those. That the BRICS summit will contribute to that. The ineptitude that we're seeing right now with the Biden administration, all the money that's going to the Ukraine war, all the money that's just, it's just crazy what they're spending money on right now. It's all going to contribute to a collapsing. And what it looks like the day after the collapse, I don't know. But I'm actually looking forward to it because I think if we will move on to the gold standard, get rid of the Fed, everybody will be amazed at how quickly America revitalizes itself and renews under that banner of freedom. So that's my take on things. And anybody who puts down President Trump, they're going to hear something about it from me. I love the guy.
Well, we know that, Jenny. Thank you for your thoughts. Are you gonna?
I'll put some links in the chat about all the stuff I just
Good.
said.
And are you going to be on your show tonight at 9 p.m.? I think it's or 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right?
I'm going live at 7 o'clock Colorado time.
Yeah, okay. Mountain time. Yep. All
And I
right.
will be discussing the Utah case. We've had a recent development that's very exciting. So I'm going to talk about that and invite people to come. I didn't have a collaboration last night, so it's getting too tired. But yeah,
Okay.
if you want to come chime in, I'd love to hear from
All right. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate you.
you.
Um, all right. Let's see who is. This is interesting. Tanya Harding Energy. I'm here to find out who has Tanya Harding Energy. All right. We're going to see what's going on with that. And I got Zach next. Hello, Tanya Harding Energy.
What's up? You know who it is.
Brady. The hell, man. I knew it. What's up, Brady? What do you got to say?
I think that it's a combination of both BRICS and bad, domestic policy. It's a combination of those two things. So it's a clusterfuck, officially, an economic clusterfuck for all of us. And I think we're about to have a taste of our own medicine, our own nonsense. And it's not going to be comfortable. And I'm a little concerned about domestic civil war breaking out in America and neighbors fighting each other.
Brady, you know I don't have you blocked. You don't have to change your identity for my talks, right?
Last night for Savvy's show, neoliberal tears having blocked.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's just for me to just stay in. I honestly a proxy for
Okay.
I guess. So, yeah, I just switched my profile back over.
All right. And any more thoughts on BRICS or anything like that? I got Zach here too.
I'm glad that people are finally talking about it and taking them seriously. And I hope this leads to a more balanced, harmonious world. It's not so polar in favor of racist psychopaths.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem in some places. All right. Let me see what Andrew has to say here, and then is that it, Brady? I'm going to bring up Zach. If you're all done. Oh, there he goes. All right, Zach. Let me take a look here. What does Andrew got? Andrew says the U.S. had enormous economic stagnation under the gold standard. It's not a band-aid that can fix horrible industrial and monetary policy. I'll look at some of that later. Hey, what's up? How you doing, Zach?
It's awesome that you're having a show. I'm glad to speak to all of it. I wanted to talk about two things. The first, the easiest one to get out of the way is BRICS. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm interested in it, but I'm suspicious because of the history of the euro. If they go down that path, the centralization of a gentleman named Mark White, I don't know if you watched me, but he's talking about this. Mark White is an economist, and he was against the euro because who creates the euro? Some bureaucrat in, I think it was Germany or something. Get the name. When when your country cannot control its currency, I was really happy that uh, Socrates, and you were at the whims of another predilections for your population, and that is uh, some say wrong. So as long as BRICS doesn't make the mistakes of the past, they might have a chance. Sele was talking about yes, the failure of what happened with it was supposed to be the currency for South America. I was predicting before in my head that BRICS might go the same way. That it might all peter out to nothing. Have you heard anything about that? Do you have any opinions on it?
Well, I kind of, I've been keeping up with a lot of stuff in economics and finance, and I have seen some things that might call it into question. Specifically that China is not actually doing as good financially as some report that they are, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm still just mining all of this stuff myself and learning as I go along.
It's a journey, definitely a journey. Yeah, it's interesting to look at the basically the game in front of us and the pieces that are being moved on the board. Which I think you said last night, some things you're going to want, you want your freedom to dictate your own life. And I totally agree that.
Yeah. No, yeah. I just said that I just have a problem being told what to do or being controlled in any small way. I mean, especially on a personal level. That's why I don't work for anybody, and most of my life I haven't either. So, but yeah, but I mean, I'm just keeping a close eye on all of this because it's become very fascinating to me, especially looking at all the stuff I'm studying with free market capitalism and so on. And so it's fascinating. It's just another big game. So I'm always curious, and especially it's one of these things right now where it's become only more prominent in people's eyes. Where I was concerned about BRICS. I was late to the game, and I had no idea that they were around since the late, maybe mid or late '90s or early '90s. At least having talks about this, and I only got wind of it in 2016, so I had no clue, and so I've only been observing it since then.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I thought it was like 2 or 3 years old. We complete.
Yeah.
The information passes us by.
Well, the only reason I knew about it is because I lived in China for a total of 5 years, 4 months at one time, and then I came back to the United States for a year, and then went back for another 4 years and 8 months. And even when I was first there in 2016, I left right before the G20 summit with Obama was there in September, and I had already seen big giant billboards and posters for BRICS out there when I was there. So. Like they had big like billboard like on the sides of buildings, or like even sometimes when there's construction, if you've seen construction areas in the US, and they'll have a fence up, and there's the name of the construction company or something like that, or these big wooden panels. Well, instead of that, they just had stuff that said bricks on it, and I just always wondered what it was. I thought because it said bricks, I thought it was just a play on something having to do with construction, and then I started looking into it. Right. Yeah, and then so I looked into it because I saw it everywhere in China, especially I lived in a so-called first tier city, but it was in all the surrounding developing areas that I was. I lived in Hangzhou, but I saw it in Shenzhen and various other places that I was. Nothing I didn't see any in Taiwan or any other places, but just mainly in mainland China is where I saw it. So
To Jenny, the gold standard. I
yeah,
was in our see backed up by a commodity because so why the gold standard failed. Tried a few times was its evaluation depends on how much gold you have on reserve.
right.
So that causes a lot of inflationary problems. I would rather people might call me crazy to say this. I've heard you talk about the fiat system. I think there's more. I would have to look into different systems. I only know a couple, but a fiat system where it's a free floating.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. People always try to talk about gold and stuff and silver being God's money and all this other stuff like that, but it's still just another arbitrary thing. I mean, you could use copper, you can use cowrie shells, you can use anything. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's true too. And I'm a student of modern monetary theory. I would love for you to look into that with your travels. Because
You mean modern Marx theory? Modern Marxist theory you're talking about?
I don't know about that. But yeah, I would love to have a talk to you about that. But one of the first things they talk about is was because backing of currency is very heavy. Like I said, because you have to have the commodity at hand.
Yeah.
It's a lot of inflation. It's really hard to pass. I'm a novice.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either, Zach, because it's another thing just getting in a layer. Like, first of all, you have it's one thing to have gold or silver and other precious metals being a representation and expression of some other commodity, right? Like you have these coins, they're printed, they have a certain amount of it. Like this 1 ounce of silver gets you this many chickens, right? But then if you in now on top of that add paper money and then say the paper money represents this amount of precious metals that represents, it's like far removing everything from each other, and it gets wacky. It's ridiculous.
He's a good way to look at it.
Because how I can like it would even be better if you're going to use a commodity like a precious metal, that instead of then putting paper money on top of it, you can use the same ounce of silver, right? Or any metal. It doesn't even have to be any of these precious metals. Something that's really readily available that's stamped on it represents a certain amount. It doesn't, like, just because it's the same thing as a dollar bill, right? Bills, like a U.S. currency, are all the same shape and size, all the same color. It's just they have a different number on it, right? So why can't that just, if you want to use metals and stop having something in between, just make all the metals like that. Make a silver 1 ounce coin equal $1, $5, $10, 20, just like the other ones, and then leave it like that. Or just have one freaking thing. Just have the paper money. It's like, stop it, all this. There's all these layers that are making problems, in my opinion. Again, I'm still in my infancy of the economic and finance, but I can already see that that's a problem. That these paper money represents this amount of gold, which represents this many cows or chickens or land. It's so stupid.
It can be very complicated. I agree with that. Yeah, that's all I had to say, Hakeem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, well, appreciate you, Zach. And thank you, Jenny and Andrew, for coming up here on Callin, and Brady as well, who was in the guise of Tanya Harding Energy, which I knew it was going to be Zach. And on Wisdom, thank you for Darlene Anderson coming up and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate you guys coming through. This was a BRICS can create viable currency options. It was reading from actually a periodical that I'd never heard before, a publication called Sputnik. So I was checking out SputnikGlobal.com, and because I'm looking at all things about the BRICS summit and economics and world finance in general. Thank you for hanging out, Finn, Maria, Dylan, Danny, Andrew, Jenny, Zach, and let's see if I got some of these comments here for you guys. Wow, Andrew, you put a lot of information here. Let's see. Why is it a bad move for BRICS to make these moves? Why would Trump want to stop them or even to be capable of doing so? Why would Trump want to stop them or even be capable of doing so? Trump's sanctions on Venezuela and pulling out of the JCPOA with Iran were major motivation for BRICS to develop independent financial institutions. Trump also had Soleimani killed while he was meeting with Iranian and Iraqi officials to discuss a ceasefire in Yemen. Ouch. And Andrew, Trump was as much of a wrecking ball to the world as Biden. Sanctioned Venezuela and stole their gold and oil assets, broke JCPOA with Iran and initiated sanctions against Iran, murdering Soleimani to prevent Saudi-Iranian detente, pulled out of INF treaty with Russia. I'm very proud of myself for pronouncing that word detente correctly. I had to look it up a few weeks ago. Sent billions in weapons to Ukraine. And the U.S. had enormous economic stagnation under the gold standard. It's not a band-aid that can fix horrible industrial and monetary policy. True. BRICS plus helping the world get off the petrodollar standard has nothing to do on its own with the U.S. inflating its own currency through horrible domestic investment. That's an idea I understand, and I agree with that. The whole world could stop using the dollar for international trade, and the U.S. could still have a strong domestic economy with good policy. I hope so. And Jenny has some links here. Saudi prince detains senior members of royal family. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been detained. A brother of the king, a former crown prince, and a cousin, royals who may have been seen as threats to this rule. Saudi royal arrested. Why top princes have been silenced. Brady says, I'm also skeptical of BRICS. And he says, I think it could be a worse version of the UN. And a few more links by Jenny here. Wow. You guys got a lot of information, a lot more than I'm going to be able to take in. Trump rolls out welcome mat for Saudi crown prince's visit to U.S. Saudi billionaire busted for corruption, helped Obama get into Harvard. Jack Cashill, author. And like to be here on the day Andrew concedes that Trump is the smartest guy in the world. I don't think that's going to happen, Jenny. uh, but I suppose you can only hope. All right. If there'll be nothing else from you guys, I once again appreciate everybody coming through for this reading and discussion about the BRICS and them creating a viable currency option. Again, thanks to Andrew, Jenny, Brady on Callin for coming up, and also for Darlene Anderson on Wisdom. You've been listening to The Hitman, Hakeem in the morning, afternoon, and night, HITMAN. That's because I don't know whenever I'm going to be on here at any of those times. And this is presented on Callin, Social Podcasting, Wisdom, Social Audio Inc., and Spreaker, Social Podcasting. Until next time, thanks for listening on Wisdom, Samuel Russell, Roman Wyden, Lois Hampson, Cecilia Grace, CEO Boss, Colby, Darlene. Thanks again for coming up. Mojo, Macha, Terrace and Dawo, Dr. Don Costa, Cassandra Richmond, Daryl with the Dashes, Eternity. Hello, Susanna Lopez, Midnight Rain, Truly Julie, Terry, Sarita, what's up, Sarah, Sharon, Her Majesty, Aaron Johnson, TaylorMade, Soldier of God, Spacey, Doobie, what's up, Doobie, Brad, Marcy Ann, Megan Larson, and Sequoia Crump for either passing through or sitting a spell. Much appreciated. And again, until next time, stay well, everybody.